Today, we are continuing our teaching of the Vimalakirti Sutra. Next week's sessions on the Vimalakirti Sutra should be held on Monday and Tuesday. Barring any special circumstances, there should be no changes to this schedule. Every time I teach these classes, I also take the opportunity to remind everyone this is because many of us lack proper mindfulness and awareness. If you truly valued your search for the Dharma, then I would not necessarily need to give reminders every single day. But as it stands, some of us have rather scattered minds. In such circumstances, I find myself with no choice but to give these reminders. Regarding the hearing of the Dharma, I hope that everyone, unless there are particularly important matters to attend to, will try as much as possible not to miss a session. Last year, we finished teaching the ornament of the Mahayana Sutras, which was completed over the course of 4 years. The Mahayana Lotus Sutra was also completed in a little over 2 years. For the Vimalakirti Sutra, the plan is to finish it within 2 years. We will teach part of it this year and the rest next year to complete it. We will have to see how it goes, as it is not entirely certain yet. In any case, everyone should strive to have a sense of patience. Do not simply follow your conceptual thoughts. If you listen to your conceptual thoughts, you might not want to attend class. Including myself, if I were to listen to my own conceptual thoughts, I might not feel like giving the class at all, because teaching a class involves even more pressure than you might face. When I am up here, I am essentially undergoing an oral examination, right? Many of the Dharma friends in our oral examination class still feel a significant amount of pressure. I can see that they are very attentive in class. I have never once seen anyone dozing off. This shows that there is indeed a sense of pressure. I feel that pressure as well. If I do not teach well, there are so many eyes and ears watching and listening to me. Even if I teach well, no one gives me a like. But if I teach even slightly poorly, people will point it out immediately. So it is really not an easy task. Therefore, I am also teaching under this pressure, and I am still doing my best to share the Dharma with everyone. The teaching may not always be perfect, but if I can provide this kind of convenience for everyone, then perhaps it is truly a meaningful endeavor. Even though I am tired and busy, I am still persisting. I hope that you, as the listeners, when we gather for class each time, will also show the same persistence, though many are busy. I am not sure how everyone is doing. At the very beginning, there are always many people, but toward the end, only a portion of them continues to persist. For example, regardless of how many people start with us, we can see that only a certain number of them remain consistent. But some people only listen to class when they happen to think of it. When they forget, they simply do not attend. Such people, one could say, are doing rather poorly in their practice. You should all observe yourselves. I will not call anyone out by name, but you can call your own name. When you have interest, you listen for a bit. When you lose interest, you do not listen at all. You might say you forgot today or that you are too busy tomorrow. And the day after that, there is always some other excuse. When it comes to seeking the Dharma, some have endless reasons not to attend. But when it comes to doing things that are harmful, they have endless reasons to engage in them. Such people truly have rather weak, wholesome roots. You must strive to create more positive conditions for yourselves. Otherwise, just as Sakya Pandita said, if one did not listen to the Dharma well in past lives, they become this dull and ignorant in the present life. For those who have no confidence in the Dharma, if this pattern continues further, they may well be reborn as animals in the next life. Now let us begin the teaching. Please generate Bodhicitta before today's teaching.
Tini jum dandi ji jang ju zangwa jambala kwap sarwa jamba ju la zamba chama mi betok be nan der song shi shambi jang sorwa jong dandi dak jiwa tamba te zhon zhang chiwer mo zho go te ji la de jena jong dandi dak ngumbran sarwa tik chi na liwe yongs garden la so be garden ji ri ji liwe nam la lan chi dan der der jang ju zangwa chimbor nam ji shirmar do bale sam te chu ji Kam chidum chewi chokder la zamba chama me ba chokbam chi de da lan derke jim chogo shamba ju jongden de julana me bayang da borzo ba shan chip de stia chi ge tokbra long tan na shamba de stia kung long tan shamba de jile sam gun de jin debe sam gun de maung be sam gun de tastar ji de la kung de bi che an de zaba go kung maung wa de no ma shin ba go tartar ji che na ne ba ga mette ndartate chomden de kipka tsara ndartar ge no ta gerlong ta kyonar kaji chig de kiego chugo gago chugo pu jung he me nyang pu jung 咱们韩文当中这里有一点破我们用破是那个出生，然后用是再出生吧，可能再出现的意思。Stiva me palana ngi paran jerwa jigbarte mertiva na longtan ba mete mertiva na ngombar zogbaran sang vayang Mahayana shambate evjen te kiwe sam tevjen nyeda ngbe sam chirtar longtan ba tevjen na merti mangar jang kiwra manjerwe ngabaragam manjerwa kang semjan tamchen na tevjen shaba dang kang chu tamchen na tevjen shaba nyeda kang phagba tamchen jang tevjen nyetang tevjen nyetang tevjen nyetang tevjen nyetang tevjen nyetang tene shamba chuji yang tevjen nyeto karte choter tabar longtan na semjan tamchen jang longtan ba yende ti jibjirjena Devjin Niji Rapta Shiva Mavshi De Tata Rapta Shiva Mayim Bishir De Shamba Kyot Gunga Tse Shanchim Gumbar Zobra San Java Ti Se Simchin Tamchi Tir Tavi Shanchim Gumbar Zobra San Java Giro Te Jishir Jena Simchin Tamchi Najis Toba Shanchu Sanwa Yimbi Shiro Shamba Kyot Gunga Tse Yongsam Nyangan Len Deba Ti Se Simchin Tamchi Jang Yongsam Nyangan Len Deba Giro Ti Jishir Jena Simchin Tamchi Yongsam Nyangan Len Dava Devjang Shaba Yongsam Nyangan le mandarte de de simjan tamjin de shinde yongsam nyang len de sham nyang len de ba ramjin de tong yu shiro shamba de tawe na live ndernam mam de mable shu shang che la na se yang ma ne donc shambander tawe yang de ba kunder to ba sta te ndort chi chi shang che li nam ngombar zogbaran chang ja mayen semgi kya mayen no shang che samma tamchit number jawago shang che na mba tamchit ji drup to ba me pa go shang che na yella she ba tamchit ja me pa go shang che na stavar jerwa tamchit yongsu che ba go shang che na yongsu to ba tamchit tam charwa shang che na yo wa dang semba dang kyo ba tam charwa to shang che ga me Shanchib nar molam tamchitang manjigbago shanchib nan zamba tamchitang charjang machigba jigbago shanchib na chuji yangi neji nebago shanchib na devjin jis stokbago shanchib na yang tagba nikim talag nebago shanchib na yetang chu mepe nisam mebago shanchib na namka dam nyambe nyambago shanchib na skewa dang jigba dang neba dang jandan yerwa Mepe Dimashe Bago, Shanchim na Simchan Tamchiji, Simdam Shobadam, Samba Yonsu Shibago, Shanchim na Chun Namgi, Kimchidar Namgi, Go Mayano, Shanchim na Vaksak Tamchijim, Sam Jorwe Nyomon Badam, Charwe Mandri Bago, Shanchim na Nedang, Ne Mayan Badam, Charwe Yer Magnebi, Chogola Magne Bago, Shanchim na Kunne Mardanjan, Devjin Nila Magne Bago, Shanchim na Mangzarte, Mante, Yoa Medo, Shanchim na Langadang, Tora Mepe, Lab Medo, Shanchim na Chikba Mepe, Ranjinji, Yonsa Tagbago, Shanchim na Raptor Nawate, Ngowanir number Tagbago, Shanchim na Zamba Mepe, Shunda Tomiba. Mebago, Shanchim na Chu Tamchim Yambani, Kong Chepe, Tatat Mebago, Shanchim na Pe Tamba Dam Jarve, Hui Mebago, Shanchim, Shinda Kong the Chipper Kavi Shir Travago, Shanchim na Namki Ramjan na Nebe Tamchet Son, Dena Ligi Sam, Semgi Mumber Song Sang Javra, Mani, Deji Virgena Liner Sadan, Shandang, Sigbadan, Lambda, Mugirdan, Sim, Nor Zigba. Gazig me pa tanda me ba tem me bar number rigba me pa go jordan de tambando jaden kurti leven ni gamer ki chulab zo pa to dagjan po ba mamchi ber tirde jordan de ti lat dag ki tamba ti tron rejam chever me tro wo
Next, we will teach the fourth chapter of the Vimalakirti Sutra. Yesterday, I already provided an introduction to this section. The fourth chapter focuses on the Bodhisattvas. The disciples were asked to go to Vimalakirti, the layman, to inquire about his illness, but in the end, none of them dared to go. So what is the primary content being conveyed here? It mainly shows that the Buddha's Shravaka disciples cannot compare with the profound and deep views of Vimalakirti, the layman. And even the Mahayana Bodhisattvas within Buddhism find it very difficult to compare with his great wisdom. This is the kind of content being presented in this chapter. Specifically in our lesson for today, the main figure is Maitreya Bodhisattva. Maitreya Bodhisattva is the Buddha's regent, which means he is the next Buddha to appear. It is also shown in terms of appearance that Vimalakirti the layman has already spoken to him, and now he too does not dare to visit. Of course, some of the commentaries from that period, such as those by great masters from Kumarajava's era, discuss this matter. They debate whether Vimalakirti the layman's realization is higher or if Maitreya Bodhisattva's realization is higher. This point is not explicitly clarified in the text itself. Perhaps they are both manifestations of high realization. It may be that this text was presented to highlight a certain level of realization. That is why these words were spoken here. Therefore, for later generations who wish to fully analyze this, there is sometimes a certain degree of difficulty. While other aspects are easy enough to explain, Maitreya Bodhisattva is a last existence being. After serving as a retinue of Shakyamuni Buddha, he went to Tusita heaven. Then, in just one more lifetime, when he finally comes to the human realm, he will have already become the fifth great Buddha of this kalpa. For such a high-level bodhisattva to be unable to match the realization of Vimalakirti the layman is sometimes quite inconceivable to us. But in any case, what we need to understand is that this text discusses the profound realizations of Buddhas and bodhisattvas. Because of this, some of the terminology here is fairly difficult to understand. The stories of the Shravaka disciples we discussed earlier are slightly easier to grasp. We can even relate to some of those states of mind. However, as we reach the chapter of Bodhisattva, perhaps the profound realizations of these bodhisattvas and the principle of breaking through all appearances may feel somewhat difficult to follow for us listeners in certain respects, but we should strive to understand and use our most subtle and sharp wisdom to analyze these teachings. After we finish this class, I hope that if you have access to some commentaries, you should also compare them, as I mentioned before. Currently, for the lessons I teach each day, some Dharma friends are organizing themselves to record and transcribe them within 2 or 3 days. They are always keeping up with the schedule. If you truly cannot remember the content yourselves, then in that case, after they post the notes online, you should use them as a helpful reference. In the past, whenever we finished a class, every session was taken very seriously afterward. It is not enough to just listen and be done with it. Do not simply feel happy at the end thinking, oh, it is finally over. This class has finally finished. Amitabha, I feel so relieved. If you found it painful while listening to the class, or felt very exhausted during the process, and only felt happy once it was over, that is not the right attitude to have. So when attending a class, please make good preparations in all aspects. In particular, do not eat too much for dinner. Otherwise, you will feel uncomfortably full, right? Your body will feel heavy and your mind will become dull. In the end, you will not be able to remember anything. You might even miss the oral transmission. So generally speaking, you should consider this. For evening classes, it is best to practice fasting after noon. If that is truly not possible, do not eat too much. This way, both body and mind remain clear. Otherwise, when you are listening, I hope I'm not being particularly long-winded. In my classes, it is generally very rare to see anyone dozing off. Sometimes when I see someone nodding off, I intentionally add a small joke into the talk, or I will suddenly try my best to come up with one on the spot. But sometimes I simply cannot think of one. At that point, if everyone laughs, even those who were dreaming will wake up. This is also a very good opportunity. So we now continue with the chapter of Bodhisattva. At this point, the Buddha addressed Maitreya Bodhisattva, "You go inquire about Vimalakirti's illness. Since none of the 10 great disciples of the Buddha could manage, you should be the one to go and inquire." As we know, Maitreya Bodhisattva is very well known in Han Buddhism, but the big-bellied Maitreya we ordinarily see in monasteries is only a manifestation of Maitreya Bodhisattva. He is not the true Maitreya Bodhisattva. There was once a monk in Zhejiang called the Buddhai monk. He is said to have been an incarnation of Maitreya Bodhisattva. Later, because of his story, in many monasteries of Han Buddhism, the first image one sees upon entering is this laughing monk. Everyone considers this to be Maitreya Bodhisattva. In reality, this is just a manifestation of Maitreya. One can also prostrate and form a connection with him. This way you form a deep connection with the Maitreya Dharma in the future. But the true form of Maitreya Bodhisattva, as he is traditionally depicted in Han Buddhism, I do not remember very clearly right now. In Tibetan Buddhism, many monasteries have Maitreya halls and Maitreya Buddha halls. He is depicted in a seated posture with one foot resting down. The photo that His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche took in Canada looked just like Maitreya Bodhisattva's seated posture. This is how Maitreya Bodhisattva appears in Tibetan Buddhism, as seen in many monasteries, especially those of the Gelug school. Almost every monastery has a Maitreya hall. This is related to the karmic connection of Tsongkhapa being reborn in Tusitta. There is this specific connection involved. In Chinese Han Buddhism, great masters like the late Venerable Taishu and many other esteemed masters have also been reborn there. Even many of Venerable Taishu's disciples and various other high monks and great virtues have been reborn in Maitreya's Tusitta heaven. Stories of this kind are very numerous. Regarding Maitreya Bodhisattva, some current commentaries mention that at that time there were 17 people who came to the Buddha to take refuge and practice. In that group, with the exception of Maitreya Bodhisattva, the other 16 practitioners generated the aspiration for liberation and eventually attained the fruit of arhatship. At that time, Maitreya Bodhisattva said, "I will not settle for arhatship, for I wish to become a Buddha." He then generated Bodhicitta in the presence of the Buddha. Of course, this is only the story of his final stage of the path. In the actual history of Maitreya Bodhisattva, there are many more accounts from his earlier lives. These are discussed quite clearly in the Garland of Jewels, the 8 great bodhisattvas, specifically within the chapter on Maitreya Bodhisattva. Later, the Buddha gave him a prediction that he would become the 5th great Buddha. There are various stories regarding this prophecy. As for the treatises composed by Maitreya Bodhisattva, according to the history of Tibetan Buddhism, Bodhisattva Asanga traveled to Tusitta heaven at that time. There he received the 5 dharmas of Maitreya from the Bodhisattva himself. These include the ornament of the Mahayana Sutras, the ornament of clear realization, the Uttaratantra Shastra, the distinguishing the middle from the extremes and distinguishing phenomena and their true nature. These are known as the 5 dharmas of Maitreya. These teachings were then propagated in the human realm during that era. Then, according to some historical accounts in Han Buddhism, while Bodhisattva Asanga was in a state of meditation, he arrived before Maitreya Bodhisattva through a pure vision. Maitreya Bodhisattva then taught him the Dharma known as Discoursing on the Stages of Concentration Practice. Later, Master Xuanzang translated this work into Chinese. The Discoursing on the Stages of Concentration Practice is generally considered to have been spoken by Maitreya, recorded by Asanga, and then translated by Master Xuanzang. There are different traditional accounts on this matter. In any case, if we form a wholesome connection with the teachings of Maitreya Bodhisattva, then at the very latest, when he comes to the human realm to turn the Dharma wheel, we will become his foremost disciples. Maitreya Bodhisattva's time in this world will not be brief. Regarding the Maitreya Descent Sutra, some people currently promoting it in the Han region claim that Maitreya Bodhisattva is coming very soon. However, that is not quite the case. Looking at the actual chronological history, the late Venerable Jingkong often mentioned 5,600,000,000 years. Regardless of the specific number, it is a very long time from now. It will be many, many years. The cycles of this world are difficult to describe, but only after such an era will he come to the human realm to turn the wheel of Dharma. So this concept of time is quite inconceivable for us. In Tibetan, Maitreya is called Champa. Champa translates to the loving one. It refers to loving kindness or one who possesses great love. There are different accounts regarding the origin of this name. As stated in the Mahayana Sutra of Contemplation of the Mind Ground, he made a resolution at that time to never eat meat. For this reason, he was called the Loving One. That is one explanation. Master Jizang also mentioned that at one time Maitreya relied upon a bhiksu who practiced loving kindness. He then made a vow himself, saying, "Throughout all my lives I will cultivate loving kindness for all beings." He received his name due to this compassionate vow. While accounts may vary, whenever we hear the name Maitreya or Champa, which essentially means the loving one, it naturally arouses compassionate bodhicitta within our mind stream. By studying and reflecting on his treatises and sutras, a heart of loving kindness and bodhicitta will naturally arise within us. Therefore, whether we are praying to the Buddha or to all the Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and esteemed masters, we should regularly study their teachings and pith instructions. We must study them continuously. When wrong thoughts or negative conceptualizations arise, which is to say, when wrong views take hold, it is especially effective to pray to the 3 roots, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. Do not view prayer as merely an ancient ritual. Now that we are in the 21st century with such advanced technology, some might think that it is no longer necessary. However, that way of thinking is incorrect. That perspective is simply wrong. Therefore, I would like to emphasize this point today. For us Buddhist practitioners, including those at our Larungar, and anyone who is interested in the future, we should place importance on the many points of intersection between Buddhism and science. We should not say, I am a monastic, so science has nothing to do with me. It is better not to have that attitude. I hope that monastics do not completely distance themselves from science, and lay people should not abandon practice. In the past, when I was serving as chief editor, we wrote some works here about exploring the mysteries of the universe. We compiled several books on the subject. Later, the public response to them was very good. So now, starting from this year, specifically from 2018, we are also exploring some treatises on both science and Buddhism, including from the Larungar side. We are looking for those with a degree of creativity in this area, those with inventiveness and a sense of innovation. Regarding comparative articles between science and Buddhism, we can continue in this direction in the future to collect research and discuss these topics. I mention this briefly just as a side note. Because of time constraints today, I should not speak too much. Otherwise, in a moment, if I end up speaking very fast at the end, our translators will have to see how they manage. Making them break into a sweat might be a good exercise for them. Half of our class time has already passed. And then this particular class, this lesson is fairly difficult. Perhaps some of you wonder, should we finish it today or not? It does not matter if we cannot finish it. Maitreya said, World-honored one, I dare not accept your instruction. Why? I remember once in the past, Maitreya Bodhisattva explained, I was there when the heavenly king of Tusitta heaven came, along with his entire retinue. I was explaining to them the practice of the stage of irreversibility, which concerns the realization of forbearance of the non-arising, because true irreversibility is only attained by an eighth ground or first ground bodhisattva. At that time, Maitreya Bodhisattva was teaching these celestial beings of Tusitta heaven Mahayana teachings on forbearance of the non-arising and the stage of irreversibility. Tusitta heaven is also known as the heaven of joy. In Tibetan, it is Gaiden, meaning completely joyful. He was teaching these celestial beings at that moment when Vimalakirti came to see him. Vimalakirti said, Maitreya, the world-honored one has bestowed on you a prediction. Shakyamuni Buddha has already given you this prophecy, stating that you will achieve Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi in a single lifetime. You are the one in your last existence. In just one more life in Tusitta heaven, when you finally come to the human realm, you will achieve Buddhahood. What lifetime will you use to experience this prediction? Vimalakirti asked, if you achieve it in one lifetime, exactly which lifetime is this single lifetime? Which lifetime are we talking about? Since you received the prediction for a single lifetime, then which lifetime is the one receiving it? He continued to ask, is it a past lifetime? Or is it a future life, or perhaps the present one? Because everyone knows this fact. Maitreya Bodhisattva is the one in his last existence. He is to obtain the fruit of Buddhahood in one lifetime. Therefore, Vimalakirti raised a question. Actually, this question is asked from the perspective of suchness. For instance, regarding the three times, past, present, and future, he is asking from the angle of the ultimate nature, or from the angle that sentient beings and Buddhas are originally equal. That is the direction of his inquiry. However, when we answer, if we respond in a purely worldly or conventional way, the answer is not truly ultimate, because the essence of any Dharma is not actually a single conventional phenomenon. It is not a single inherently existent thing. It consists of both ultimate reality and conventional appearance. If one only answers from the angle of appearance, that answer is actually incorrect. Therefore, in this specific case, if we say, I have already received the prediction, then in which lifetime did you receive it? Was it in a past lifetime? Was it in the present or the future? He analyzes this further below. If you say it happened in a past lifetime, those past dharmas have already completely ceased. It is just like a dream from yesterday, or a flower from yesterday. Today, not even a single atom of it remains. Everything from yesterday is gone. If you say it is in a future lifetime, well, future dharmas have not yet arisen. Since the future has not happened, it is like the son of a barren woman. It is impossible for it to exist. If you say it is in the present lifetime, the present lifetime cannot abide, because in this life there is no truly inherently existent present moment. As the Buddha himself said, Bhiksus, in this immediate present you are born, you age, and you are extinguished. He cited this passage from a sutra. The Buddha also said in a sutra, your so-called present lifetime is essentially this very instant. Within a single instant, there is birth. Within a single instant, there is aging. Within a single instant, there is extinction. In this moment, there is birth, aging, and extinction. As I was reading just now, there is also taking rebirth and transmigrating. And there is also appearing. In the Tibetan version, there are two more processes mentioned afterward. All of these occur within one instant. Actually, we can also say that the sutra teaches us that within this one instant, there is birth, aging, and death. There is also transmigrating and moving to another place and appearing in another place, all within one single instant. Of course, if we analyze this instant as an accomplished instant or the most subtle instant, then it is even more impossible to grasp. So, Vimalakirti said, if you say you received the prediction in a past life, the past is already extinguished. If you say you received it in a future life, the future life has not arrived. As for the present life is non-abiding. Similarly, we might think to ourselves, when exactly did I arise? The Diamond Sutra says, the past mind cannot be grasped, the present mind cannot be grasped, and the future mind cannot be grasped. None of these three minds can be grasped. On the level of appearance, these three times should seem to exist. But in reality, this is not true or accurate. The ultimate suchness is ungraspable. This is the true nature of all phenomena. Therefore, he analyzes from the perspective of the three times, including the past, present, and future. If you received the prediction through birthlessness, then when you received it, you either received it through birth, meaning you received it within a single lifetime, or you received it through birthlessness. Apart from these two ways, there is no other way to find it. So if you say that arising in the three times does not work, and that a single lifetime is not the way, claiming instead that you received it through birthlessness, Vimalakirti would say that is even more impossible. He began to laugh and said, it is not like that at all. This refers to the image we described. He said if you receive the prediction in birthlessness, then birthlessness is the primary status. Birthlessness is essentially emptiness. Birthlessness is the primary status, the suchness of reality. It is the true nature of all phenomena. However, within that primary status, there is no way to receive a prediction. How can one receive a prediction within birthlessness? There is absolutely nothing there to receive. It is also impossible to attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. How could Maitreya have received a prediction for a single lifetime? How did you receive a prediction for one lifetime, Maitreya Bodhisattva? Did you not say you received it for one lifetime? Although Maitreya is the one in his last existence, if someone posed this question to us, it would be quite troublesome. First, he asks if you received the prediction in a single lifetime. If I say yes, then which lifetime is it among the three times? He analyzes it from those three periods. If it is not within a lifetime, is it in birthlessness? But birthlessness makes it even more impossible. Birthlessness is the true suchness of all phenomena. How could one attain such a thing? The main thing we need to understand here is that he is not negating the prediction on the level of appearance. However, regarding that appearance, some might consider it to be an inherently existent Dharma. Such an inherently real phenomenon cannot be obtained in any context. Therefore, the main point being made here is that whether it is the prediction, the Bodhisattva, or Buddhahood, all these things exist only as something dreamlike and illusion-like. Just as in the Dzogchen teachings, it is like a vague yet luminous clarity. That is how it is obtained. Something truly substantial and inherently real is impossible to find. In his commentary on the adornment of the middle way, Mifam Rinpoche cited a scriptural passage. We often use this quote as well. If even one phenomenon were truly established, all objects of knowledge would never appear, because not a single phenomenon is truly established. All boundless objects of knowledge appear with perfect clarity. If even one truly established phenomenon existed, that truly established thing would act as an obstruction, and nothing else could appear. It is exactly because not a single thing is truly established that all phenomena can appear to us, just like reflections in a mirror or the moon in the water. Everything can manifest before us clearly. This is the very reason why appearances are possible. This point is very important. Did you receive the prediction from the generation of suchness? Above, it was shown that receiving it through birth or birthlessness is impossible. Now he asks from the perspective of suchness, is it possible to receive a prediction? Again, it is impossible. Did you receive it from the generation of suchness? Or did you receive it from the extinction of suchness? In both the Tibetan and Tang translations, suchness is the term used here. It is impossible to receive a prediction from the level of appearances, neither through birth nor through birthlessness. In that case, is it within the suchness of all phenomena? Did you receive the prediction from the generation of suchness, or did you receive it from the extinction of suchness? He then posed the second question. Maitreya Bodhisattva was also feeling a bit overwhelmed. Vimalakirti, the layman, had put him in a very difficult position. Actually, some of our Dharma friends feel the same way. They do not dare to go near certain formidable lay practitioners. When those practitioners invite you for a meal, you might say, I cannot come because I'm not feeling very well today. This is because you are afraid they will ask many difficult questions. Of course, some people ask questions deliberately. They just want to show off their own knowledge. For instance, if someone has studied Madhyamaka, they might do this on purpose. When we went to Europe, we heard that some people there started preparing 3 months before we even arrived. Once they heard we were coming, they began making preparations. They were deliberately preparing tough questions to ask us. At the time they asked, it was basically possible to see their intent. From their expressions and the way they acted, when they asked questions in that manner, the way to answer them was also to not answer them too sincerely. Sometimes it is better to just smile. Sometimes when answering, it is more effective to use another point related to their own view and just give a small indication of the answer. Otherwise, if you answer very sincerely, you will find they have prepared in advance for every angle. If you answer from one direction, they will refute you from another direction. If you answer from that way, they will use it to challenge you further. So sometimes a simple smile is best. Then they will sense it and feel embarrassed themselves. Now the question is posed from the perspective of suchness. Was the prediction received from the generation of suchness, or was it received from the extinction of suchness? If you say it was received from the generation of suchness, then understand that suchness is without generation. This suchness has never been generated, because suchness truly has never arisen. It is just like space. How could it be generated? It is impossible. If the prediction was received from the extinction of suchness, then understand that suchness is without extinction. The true suchness of all phenomena and all dharmas is without generation and without extinction. It never ceases. Following this logic, the suchness of all sentient beings is also like this. The suchness of all dharmas is also like this. All of these noble ones. The suchness of bodhisattvas and sages is also like this. Even you, Maitreya Bodhisattva, are such like. Today, Maitreya Bodhisattva was left a bit unsure of what to do. He is teaching that suchness is without generation and without extinction. And indeed it is so. The suchness of all beings is without generation and without extinction. The suchness of all dharmas is without generation and without extinction. The suchness of all noble ones is without generation and without extinction. Even your own suchness, Maitreya, is without generation and without extinction. In that case, how could you receive a prediction from the perspective of suchness? So was there no prediction received? Is it possible something went wrong? This is the analysis from the level of suchness. Earlier, we analyzed it from the perspective of the 3 times. Now we move below to the analysis of the equality between sentient beings and Buddhas. If Maitreya Bodhisattva received a prediction, then all sentient beings should also receive it. Based on the analysis of suchness we just covered, if this is true, then if you, Maitreya, received a prediction, then all sentient beings should also receive a prediction. What is the reason for this? Because suchness is non-dual and non-differentiated. In suchness, there is no difference between you and other beings. It is not as if one being possesses suchness, while another being does not, or that Maitreya has suchness, but other beings do not. There is no such thing as that. Suchness is like space, pervading all worlds. It pervades all sentient beings. As we often say, the Tathagata Garbha pervades all sentient beings. So if Maitreya truly received a prediction at the level of suchness, then all sentient beings should also receive it. They would all become those in their last existence. In that case, there would be far too many Buddhas after Shakyamuni. All sentient beings would become Buddhas. If Maitreya attains Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, then all sentient beings should also attain it. Why is that? Because all sentient beings are the characteristic of Bodhi, sentient beings are the Buddha. The exoteric tradition contains such scriptural citations. In the Tantric teachings, it is also often said that sentient beings are actually no different from Buddhas. Afflictions and Bodhi are no different. Sentient beings and Buddhas are no different. From the perspective of suchness, this is entirely the case. If Maitreya Bodhisattva attains extinction, once Maitreya Bodhisattva attains nirvana, then all sentient beings should also attain extinction. What is the reason and the cause for this? The Buddhas understand that all sentient beings are ultimately extinguished. The ultimate suchness of Maitreya Bodhisattva in the state of extinction and the ultimate suchness of all sentient beings in that same state are in reality completely the same. The Buddha is also fully aware of this point. The Buddha penetrates all phenomena. When all Buddhas penetrate all phenomena, they perfectly understand that the true and ultimate suchness of all sentient beings is no different from the characteristic of nirvana. It is exactly the same. The Treasury of Dharmadhatu also cites many exoteric teachings, including the citation from the Ratnakuta Sutra mentioned earlier. All dharmas are the same as the Tathagata. It follows this principle as well. Therefore, everything is already nirvana. It is impossible for beings to be non-nirvana or non-extinguished originally and then have extinction appear later on. This is absolutely impossible. This kind of teaching on suchness might sometimes be a little difficult for us to hear and comprehend, but when you truly understand the ultimate suchness of all phenomena and its most profound meaning, you should analyze everything from the perspective of suchness. You must analyze it from that level. Why is that? If you do not analyze it this way, our current appearance and our conventional and false way of analyzing things cannot provide an accurate answer regarding a false Dharma. After all, it is ultimately false. If we wish to reach the truth, we must find it at the level of the suchness of a Dharma. Otherwise, things are just like dreams, illusions, bubbles, or shadows. They appear without self-nature and perish immediately. What kind of result can be established on such a principle? Any view established on that basis would be unreliable. So if all phenomena truly exist, then they must exist within suchness. The same applies to Maitreya Bodhisattva receiving a prediction. If there is an inherently real receiving of a prediction, it should be obtained at that level of suchness. Therefore, the suchness of all phenomena is being analyzed here through the question of his prediction. Of course, some of us might think this is not the right way to say it. In appearance, I receive the prediction, but in suchness, there is no receiving of it. Everything is without generation and without extinction. Maitreya Bodhisattva would certainly be able to answer like that. That would be very simple. But what is mainly being discussed here is whether, at the level of ultimate suchness, there is even a speck of dust worth of an inherently real Dharma. If there were, it should be possible to establish it through reasoning. But since it cannot be found, even if something is established within the illusion of nominal conventions, that established thing is still false. By analogy, we can see that for all the things in this world, there is no need for us to hold on to them so tightly. Whether it is gain or loss, when we have fame or talent, or when we possess everything we currently have, it all appears without self-nature. It can appear when causes and conditions are complete, but once it perishes, changes, or diminishes in any way, everyone should realize that the original nature of all phenomena is just like this. For instance, when an elderly person sees that the reflection of the moon in the water has vanished, or when a beautiful water bubble bursts, he does not feel much distress. By its very nature, it cannot withstand any wind or rain. There is nothing lasting to it. But children who do not know any better might struggle to catch a water bubble and become very attached to it. It is like the balloons that children blow up. I have seen children at the beach crying because their balloon popped. Then the elderly person keeps comforting them. Many things in this world, including some conventional things, and even our own bodies, are described this way. The Shuramgama Sutra mentions a story about the Buddha and King Prasenajit. When the king was 62 years old, the Buddha met with him. The Buddha asked what the Ganges River was like when he first saw it. He replied that his mother took him to see it when he was 3 years old. That was the first time he saw the Ganges. The Buddha then noted that the king was now 62. He asked how the king saw the Ganges now. He asked if the river looked the same as it did before. The king considered it to be the same. However, from another perspective, they are actually not the same. This is because at that time you were still very small. Now you have already reached middle age. Your entire body has undergone significant changes. What he is showing here is that there is something that does not change, while there is also an appearance that is continuously changing. But what kind of view should we establish? In reality, the ultimate suchness is without reduction or diminishment. One could say it is without generation or extinction, without coming or going. However, there is a kind of appearance that we mistakenly consider to be permanent and real. We perceive it to be uninterrupted and continuous, but in reality it is impossible for it to be that way. We are influenced by many causes of confusion. Do not take what your eyes see as the ultimate truth. Do not take what your mind thinks as the ultimate truth. Do not assume that what the five faculties perceive is correct. Many of these perceptions are just illusions. What we consider to be beautiful is actually just a collection of particles in a different shape. What we consider to be delicious is simply made of many taste particles that happen to suit your tongue faculty. We have many illusions, so it is important to understand these principles correctly. At this point, Vimalakirti provides a summary. Maitreya, do not deceive these gods of the Tusitta heaven. Do not inspire them in this misleading way. Truly, there is no one who generates the intention to achieve Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. There is certainly no teaching of non-regression like the one you are giving. You are completely deceiving people. Do not do this, said the layman Vimalakirti. Why did Maitreya not dare to visit him later? Because at that moment he had been feeling quite pleased. He thought he was teaching the path of non-regression to them. Maitreya Bodhisattva was very confident at the start, but then he was completely stumped by those few questions. Vimalakirti told him not to deceive these celestial sons. These gods are deeply attached to the appearance of a regent of Buddhahood. They are extremely attached to forms. Some commentaries explain that since Maitreya is currently in the Tusitta heaven, he will remain there for quite a long time. Why is that? It is because many of those gods are especially attached to forms. On one hand, the layman Vimalakirti wanted to break the attachment to forms held by the gods of Tusitta heaven. On the other hand, within suchness, a real prediction is truly unattainable. Maitreya, you should have these gods forsake their discriminative views about Bodhi. Do not let them accumulate more binding views. Within this Dharma, it is simply unattainable. The One-Ling record says, Dharma originally does not exist, so do not hold the view of non-existence. Dharma originally is not non-existent, so do not hold the view of existence. Dharma originally does not exist, but do not view this as a state of non-existence. Dharma originally is not non-existent, but do not view this as a state of existence. This is just like what Tsongkhapa said. In the three principal aspects of the path, existence and non-existence are both emotional views, like a filmy cataract. Notions of existence and non-existence are entirely biased views. Clinging to either is a form of prejudice. It is like the hair seen by someone with a cataract. It is absolutely impossible for it to exist in reality. Therefore, we should understand that dharmas are without suchness. This understanding is very important. When we first hear about these teachings, they might be a little difficult to accept at first. But in reality, the merit of such understanding is immense. Some teachers prefer to give only simple teachings related to practice. They are reluctant to go deeper, fearing that others might develop wrong views. But even if wrong views arise, teaching the Dharma gate of emptiness brings great merit. In Garland of Jewels, the 8 great bodhisattvas that I translated last year, there is the Arya Manjushra Vihara Sutra. The Tibetan and Chinese versions seem to differ somewhat. This sutra is related to Manjushra Bodhisattva. In Chinese, it is called the Manjushra Shrikara Sutra. The sutra mentions that at one time, Manjushra Bodhisattva and Shariputra were discussing matters concerning meditation. Manjushra Bodhisattva shared many profound teachings with him. They were surrounded by 500 bhiksus. These 500 bhiksus were all followers of the Shravakayana. When Manjushra Bodhisattva taught them these profound dharmas about non-attainment, non-coming, and non-arising, those 500 bhiksus began to feel afraid. They developed wrong views and were unwilling to accept the teaching. They said that they could no longer listen to Manjushra Bodhisattva's dharma. They wanted to stop listening because it sounded too strange. They were shocked that everything was considered unattainable. They had always believed that good karma brings good results and bad karma brings bad ones. All 500 of them stood up and prepared to leave. So even Manjushra Bodhisattva encounters difficulties sometimes. 500 people were about to walk out, but Manjushra Bodhisattva did not get angry. What did they say? They said in unison, "We do not want to see Manjushra Bodhisattva. We do not want to hear Manjushra Bodhisattva. We are unwilling to stay where Manjushra Bodhisattva is. That is what they said. And then Manjushra Bodhisattva replied, excellent, excellent. What you say is correct. Not looking at the body of Manjushra Bodhisattva is correct. This is because the body of Manjushra Bodhisattva does not exist. Not listening to the voice of Manjushra Bodhisattva is correct. My voice does not exist. Not staying here is also correct, because this place does not exist. Later, many bhikkhus wondered, what is he saying? What does this mean? They came over again to ask questions. Then Manjushra Bodhisattva taught some even more profound Dharma gates. At this time, 400 bhikkhus understood the meaning within his words. They all attained various levels of elevated realization. However, quite unexpectedly, 100 bhikkhus developed extreme wrong views and immediately fell into the Maharaurava hell. At this moment, Shariputra became very anxious. This is not right. This is not right. Manjushra Bodhisattva, we have done something terrible today. Look, so many bhikkhus have fallen into the hell realm. We should protect them. These beings are very pitiful. You should not have done this. Today's Dharma transmission was a failing choice. Look, although 400 are doing better, 100 have already fallen down. Right at this moment, Shakyamuni Buddha appeared. Shakyamuni Buddha praised Manjushra Bodhisattva, saying that what he did that day was correct. These bhikkhus who fell into the hell realm may suffer temporarily, but in a very short time they will be reborn into Sita heaven. Eventually they will also attain liberation. If you had not taught the Dharma gate of emptiness to them, even if they took refuge, received precepts, and had faith, it would be impossible for them to be liberated from samsara. It is precisely because you taught them the Dharma gate of emptiness that they will attain liberation very quickly. At this point, Shariputra also realized the truth. Since the Buddha praises it, then I also praise it. Then he began to praise him. This story exists in the Chinese Tripitaka. You can have a look when it is convenient. The point is that when we teach profound Dharma, some people might develop wrong views. This includes teaching tantric teachings, where some might fall into lower realms. I also have some concerns when teaching tantric teachings. The majority of people develop confidence in tantra and emptiness, but a minority may break their samaya or develop wrong views. However, sometimes I think about the principles Manjushra Bodhisattva taught regarding emptiness. Perhaps it is still meaningful and will not be so severe. Therefore, diligently propagating the Dharma gate of emptiness is very important. He said that you should have these gods, forsake these discriminative thoughts that seek Bodhi. Why? Bodhi cannot be attained with the body, and it cannot be attained with the mind. It is impossible for our 5 faculties to attain it with our physical body and senses. It is also impossible to attain it through conceptual thoughts. This is because Bodhi is not attained by relying on such thoughts. The Mahayana Shursaraja Sutra says, if one discriminates about Bodhi, that is not called seeking Bodhi. If you are discriminating about Bodhi, then it is no longer called Bodhi. In conduct toward Bodhi, there is no discriminative aspect. If our actions and conceptual thoughts clings to a specific form or idea of Bodhi, then it is not true Bodhi. From the perspective of ultimate suchness, the concepts of Bodhi or Bodhisattva that we often think about do not have any real suchness. This lack of real suchness is not just a religious statement. When we truly use our own wisdom to observe, we will come to understand this. So I encourage you to read more books on Madhyamaka and the Dharma gate of emptiness. In time, you will develop genuine confidence in the Dharma gate of emptiness. This does not depend on anyone else. That kind of confidence is real, not just a superficial feeling. It is not about seeing a dignified appearance and simply crying out, Lama Khen, Lama Khen. That is not the kind of confidence I mean. Sometimes our confidence is mixed with a bit of fear. When looking at that kind of confidence, it is hard to say if it is right or wrong. There is nothing to cry or laugh about. It is just a difficult state to describe. However, everyone's discipline here was very good yesterday. In fact, everyone is capable of change. I prefer a confidence that flows steadily like a stream. Do not let it all evaporate at once. Otherwise, for some of us, especially those who have just taken refuge, their confidence is especially great at first, but then it is gone in a flash. In the end, only a big pile of wrong views remains. This is not very good. At the beginning, your confidence might not be especially full, but slowly and steadily, if you still have this kind of confidence 10 or 20 years later, that is the kind of person we appreciate the most. Of course, sometimes people's personalities may differ, A little enthusiasm is also fine, but sometimes the enthusiasm in Buddhism should be a little more refined. For certain Buddhist activities in the future, including when hosting ceremonies, some hosts should not be too lively. When hosting, one should be more in line with the spirit of Buddhism itself. Especially as taught in the Pratimoksa, many behaviors should not be like performing a role. You all should understand this. So sometimes we might be a little quiet. But then again, having no expression at all is also not good. However, being overly expressive might not be good either. So we will see how it goes in the future. Seeking Bodhi is truly such that it cannot be attained with the body or the mind. Below, Bodhi is actually elaborated upon from many aspects. This content is also not especially difficult. We can make a simple literal interpretation. Actually, in the Tibetan version, there are no phrases afterward like for such and such a reason. It simply states directly what Bodhi is. It says Bodhi is this or Bodhi is that. Looking at some other translations, they are basically analyzed in this way as well. But the Chinese way of explaining it starts with a position, and then it is explained through a specific reason. This can also be interpreted. So first, extinction is Bodhi. All proliferations of existence and non-existence completely cease, and this is Bodhi. What is the reason? It is because of the extinction of the characteristics. The Diamond Sutra also says all that has form is illusion. When one sees that all forms are non-form, then one sees the Tathagata. But most people only quote the first part, all that has form is illusion. Many people find it difficult to finish the latter part. One should recite the whole thing. If one sees that forms are without form, then one truly sees the reality of the Tathagata. Actually, these characteristics are very important. There is a sutra called the Bodhisattva Ratnavadana Bodhicharya Sutra. It is also a sutra in the Chinese tradition. It has not been found in Tibetan. The name of this sutra is quite long, but sometimes I'm not sure how their translation methods worked. Sentient beings originally have no characteristics, and all dharmas are unattainable. Since sentient beings originally have no form, dharmas are unattainable. To say there are characteristics of Bodhi is foolishness and not a right view. If someone considers Bodhi to have a specific form, then that person is a fool. Non-contemplation is Bodhi because it transcends the conditions. We often talk about contemplating this or that, such as Buddha images or impurity. But true Bodhi has no subject or object of contemplation. Non-contemplation is Bodhi. This is because it is free from all reference objects and observing subjects. Non-practice is Bodhi because it is without recollection. When all discriminative thoughts are absent, that is Bodhi. What is the reason? It is because all recollection and discriminative thoughts do not exist within true Bodhi. Eradication is Bodhi because of renouncing the views. We might think eradication means the view of nihilism, as if nothing exists. That would be quite frightening. But actually, eradication is true Bodhi. When afflictive and cognitive obscurations are completely severed, that is Bodhi. At that point, all views of existence, non-existence, right and wrong are renounced. All such views are absent. Transcendence is Bodhi. Transcendence can be called Bodhi. Why? Because within Bodhi, all clinging and discriminative delusions have been transcended. All those delusions have completely departed. Bodhi is certainly characterized by this transcendence. Hindrances are Bodhi. We often talk about hindrances and obstacles. I have run into an obstruction again. Another obstacle has appeared in my practice. Actually, hindrance is true Bodhi. In the future, when a hindrance arises for you, that is Bodhi. Why? Because of the hindrance of the vows. Within true Bodhi, clinging to aspirations and vows does not exist, which is what hindrance of the vows means. This is because at that state, all aspirations are hindered. Thus, hindrance itself is Bodhi. What is the reason for this? It is because all forms of aspiration have been completely hindered. So here, the explanation is sometimes given from the opposite angle. It analyzes things from the perspective of original emptiness, free from all proliferation. That is the angle being used for this analysis. Non-entry is Bodhi because of the absence of lustful attachment. Non-entry means not moving toward or entering anything. This is Bodhi. Non-entry is Bodhi. When we do not receive anything, that is Bodhi. What is the reason? It is because it is free from all craving and attachment. Within Bodhi, there is nothing to crave or pursue. It simply does not exist. So truly not entering or seeking anything is what we call Bodhi. This is because within true Bodhi, there is no craving or attachment. Accordance is Bodhi. Accordance can be called Bodhi. What is the reason? because of accordance with suchness. Of course, accordance here does not refer to accordance with forms. Actually, it means according with reality as it is, or according with dharmata. It is about according with true reality. It is according with the suchness of all phenomena. This can be called accordance, and it is Bodhi. What is the reason? Because it accords with suchness. Abiding is Bodhi. What does one abide in? Abiding in Dharma nature. This is inconceivable. It is the true reality of all phenomena, which is free from all forms. Approach is Bodhi. What does it approach? Approach to the reality limit. We can say reaching it is Bodhi. What is reached exactly? It is reaching the ultimate goal of all phenomena, reaching the other shore. The other shore is in reality true reality. Non-duality is Bodhi. Why is non-duality considered Bodhi? Because it has transcended the two dharmas. One is the dharma of consciousness. The other is the dharma of external objects beyond consciousness. Both of these have been transcended. In other words, the grasping subject and the grasped object have both been transcended. Universal sameness is Bodhi. Universal sameness means being equal, and that is Bodhi. Why? Because Bodhi is completely equal to space. Space has no obstructions and no form whatsoever. The essence of Bodhi also lacks these. The unconditioned is Bodhi. The unconditioned Dharma is the true essence of Bodhi. What is the reason? Because of the absence of generation, abiding, and extinction. Unconditioned Dharma has no arising, abiding, or ceasing. Conditioned Dharma, however, has the characteristics of generation, abiding, and extinction. Understanding is Bodhi. The knowing mentioned here refers to thorough understanding. This kind of wisdom can be called Bodhi. So what kind of understanding is this? It is the comprehension of the mental processes of sentient beings. It is thoroughly knowing everything about them. So here, this Bodhi is not entirely a form of simple emptiness. In the Shravakayana, the luminous self-nature, which is vividly clear, has not been made especially explicit. It is like the phrase, abide in non-abiding, yet give rise to the mind. Originally, within emptiness, there is nothing to abide in. But within it, a mind of luminous and wondrous power can arise. Therefore, understanding is Bodhi. So it is different from insentient dharmas. It is also different from other general dharmas. Non-assemblage is Bodhi because of the non-assemblage of the entrances. This assemblage here means encountering or converging. In this context, non-assemblage means not encountering or converging is Bodhi. Why? Because all the entrances do not assemble. The entrances mentioned here refer to the 12 ayatanas. The 6 sense faculties and 6 sense objects make up the 12 ayatanas. The meaning of entrance here implies that non-assemblage is what constitutes Bodhi. So why is that? Because the entrances cannot truly exist. Whether it is the 6 internal or 6 external ayatanas, all of these do not assemble or make contact because of their emptiness. It is impossible for the 12 ayatanas to have that kind of contact. Non-aggregation is Bodhi. Not combining or becoming entangled is Bodhi. Why? Because of the transcendence of the latent influences of the afflictions. It is because none of those exist anymore. Actually, this kind of interpretation is fairly easy to understand. The non-locative is Bodhi. Having no fixed place or location whatsoever is Bodhi. What is the reason? Because of formlessness. Bodhi certainly has no form or color. If you try to see it through form and color, it is not the Tathagata. Provisional names are Bodhi. True Bodhi is a provisional name. Why? This is because names, terms, and words are all empty. The Platform Sutra of the 6th Patriarch also says, Bodhi originally has no tree, the bright mirror is also not a stand. Originally there is not a single thing. Where could dust alight? At that point, the 6th Patriarch initially had not fully penetrated this truth. But later, when the 5th Patriarch explained it to him again, he finally understood the true nature of the mind. The activities of the conversion of suchness are Bodhi because of the non-existence of grasping and forsaking. These dharmas that are like illusion and transformation are also in reality Bodhi. This is because there is no grasping and no forsaking. The non-turbulent is Bodhi. The term turbulent here does not simply mean being scattered or chaotic. It refers to all proliferations that do not accord with true reality. That is what is called turbulence. So the non-turbulent is Bodhi. Why? It is because its self-nature is always peaceful and pure, characterized by permanent composure. Good serenity is Bodhi because of the purity of the natures. Good serenity refers to a wondrous state of cessation. This kind of cessation, which surpasses that of a Shravaka Arhat, is Bodhi. What is the reason? It is because the self-nature is inherently pure. Non-grasping is Bodhi. This is due to the transcendence of objectified mentation, or being free from all grasping. In this state, all forms are absent. Non-differentiation is Bodhi. When there is no Dharma of any other substance, that is Bodhi. Why? Because of the universal sameness of the Dharmas at the level of essence. Non-comparison is Bodhi. When there is no comparison or analogy whatsoever, that is Bodhi. What is the reason? Because of the impossibility of analogy. There are no reference points or other inherently real dharmas to compare it to. True Bodhi can sometimes be compared to space, but space is only a partial analogy. Therefore, when discussing true reality, there is no way to use analogies. It can only be realized through the self-observation of one's own mind. Finally, the subtle is Bodhi. The word subtle in Tibetan can sometimes be translated as very fine. The most subtle state is Bodhi. What is the reason? It is because the difficulty of understanding the dharmas, or the true nature of all phenomena, it is very difficult to penetrate. Deeply still, free from proliferation, luminous, unconditioned dharma. In other words, it is the wondrous dharma. Why is it wondrous? Our ordinary conceptual thoughts cannot reach it. Especially coarse conceptual thoughts cannot penetrate it. An ordinary scattered mind also cannot penetrate true Bodhi. Only an extremely subtle wisdom can penetrate it. Now, regarding what follows, in some other versions there is still one more passage. In the Tang translation, there is a section stating that Bodhi pervades all things like space. There is indeed such a passage. And in the Tibetan version, there is also one more passage afterward. The meaning is that Bodhi, like space, pervades all things. The body is like grass, like wood, like a spear, like a sword, or like a mirage. The text then speaks of the body and mind as ungraspable. Since body and mind are ungraspable, it first says the body is like grass or wood. It is like a spear, a sword, or a mirage. Then it says the mind has no color or any particular appearance. It has no form, no indication, and no foundation. That is how this passage was spoken. This particular passage only exists in the Tibetan text. It describes the body as such and the mind as lacking such and such. Again, this is only found in the Tibetan version. In other versions, including the English, it is not there. It is also absent from the Japanese. If we look at others, including the translation by Zhiqian's version is even shorter and doesn't have it. This section is slightly different, but it is worth noting that in the Tibetan, the Sanskrit source is actually fairly similar to the Tang translation. There is just a slight difference in this part. Perhaps the Tibetan version relied on a different Sanskrit source text. When we make comparisons like this, we should not give rise to discriminating thoughts by thinking one is correct and the other is not. Actually, that is not the case at all. For instance, for the Dharma spoken by the Buddha, various arhats among his followers recorded it through their own memory. At that time, it is possible that their versions differed, just like when a Dharma master gives a class, and several people are taking notes below. Eventually, each version became an accurate record in its own right. When they were finally translated in different places, they relied on these different versions. So whether it is the Vimalakirti Sutra or the Lotus Sutra we discussed before, there were many different versions in India. Therefore, we cannot say one is correct because it has extra content while the other is wrong. We cannot say that, for example, if a very accomplished master has a dozen capable disciples, when they record his teachings, the results are obtained through different individual perspectives. It is just like the way of the Bodhisattva. When Bodhisattva Shantideva recited it, many people with the power of perfect recall recorded it. Once it was recorded, later when Shantideva was in a certain location, he designated a specific version as the definitive one, but he never suggested that the other versions were unreasonable. Some versions have 1,000 verses, some have a bit more, and some have a bit less. It is exactly the same situation. So in the future, when we compare different versions or different translations, we should use them only for reference. There is no need to change one translation based on another. Using them as references is perfectly fine, but we do not need to make changes, right? This is very important. Finally, he says to the world-honored one, when the layman Vimalakirti was teaching this Dharma, 200 celestial beings achieved the forbearance of the non-arising of Dharmas. So that was the situation I encountered back then. As you can see, even Maitreya Bodhisattva does not dare to inquire about Vimalakirti's illness. The reason is that regarding the question of receiving the prophecy, he has always felt that he didn't have a completely satisfactory answer. So even now, this memory remains very clear. Thus, it is not just the 500 great disciples. Even these outstanding masters and bodhisattvas of the Mahayana also found themselves in a position where they had no way to respond to Vimalakirti. So he said, I do not dare to go visit Vimalakirti. Let us stop here for today. We managed to finish today's portion, didn't we?